Hi guys, it's Fred here, and in this video I'm going to show you how I fixed over 100 clients' shoulder pain, so you can just copy me. So let's jump into it straight away. I've got a load of notes here, I'm going to run through all of this. Any questions about any of this stuff, just drop me a message on Instagram or any other social media. So let's jump into it. So the first thing that I do, or that you need to do as well, is you actually need to test your body and your shoulder and actually see what's wrong and therefore what needs to be improved upon. So I split testing up into 3 different focal points. So number 1 is full body. So how do you move globally, like throughout your body? So some really simple movements that I look at: toe touch, so bending over and touching your toes. I'm not bothered about how much range of motion you've got, so how far you can bend down, if you can touch the floor or not. I'm looking at how you get there. So this is really, really important, and this is a key part of the full body assessment I do with people. I'm not actually bothered about the range of motion. I'm looking at what body parts you're using and potentially what other structures are compensating. So for example, with a toe touch, when you're bending down to pick something up off the floor, you're just bending down. Do you use your spine and your hips equally? So do you spread the load out through your whole body, or do you just bend through your lower back, for example? Or do you keep your back completely straight and just bend and then just sit back into your hips? So there's quite a few different options here and it gets quite complex. But to summarize the toe touch, essentially what we're looking for is spreading the load out evenly between the spine and the hips. So we're rounding through the spine and then we're also sitting back into the hips. Another movement that I look at is side bending and rotation in standing and in sitting. So side bending would be hands above your head in standing, and then essentially side bending side to side, and rotation would be hands across chest and rotating. The reason I do both these movements in standing and compare them to sitting is, again, we're looking at compensation patterns. So in standing, you can cheat a little bit more with your hips and with your torso. So for example, with the side bend like this, in standing you can use your hips to compensate and stick them out a little bit more, which will allow you to get more range of motion through your spine. And then the same thing with rotation. You can get some rotation in your legs as you're rotating side to side in standing. So what we do is we take, I look at you in standing, then I look at you in sitting. And obviously sitting will take out the lower limb, so that will take out the hips. Therefore, when we do the side bend and the rotation in sitting, no hip involvement, so we can just isolate the spine and look at, is there any difference between standing and sitting, or is there no difference? Okay, and again, that will highlight if you've got stiff hips, if you haven't got stiff hips, or if you're just bending through your spine. So again, with those movements, we're looking for even distribution of bend through the spine and through the hips. In standing, we're not looking for one or the other to do more of the job. Okay. The next movement I will look at is the air squat. So the only thing I'm looking for here is, when you're doing the squat, do you shift or do you put weight into one side more than the other? So do you sit into one hip more than the other? Commonly this happens when people get to 90 degrees. You might even feel it when you're squatting. You'll get nearly all the way down and then you'll sit deeper into the left hip or the right hip. Now you might be wondering why this relates to the shoulder. Well, the pelvis definitely relates to the shoulder, because what the pelvis does then relates to what the rib cage does, and obviously the shoulder blades are attached onto the back of the rib cage, and then that affects what the shoulder does. So it all ties in. So I'm just looking at all these things when I'm looking at full body movement. Okay, that's another movement I'll look at. I will also just look at you doing a hinge. So I'll just I'll instruct you on the app to do a hinge pattern, which is just, imagine you're doing an RDL or a deadlift, and you'll just go down to kind of the bottom of your hinge without any weight, and then just do a few reps there. And again, I'm looking for, how are you hinging? are you actually sitting into your hips and using your glutes, or are you just hinging through your back, which again can be an issue and can relate further up the chain. Okay, those are the main movements I look at from a full body point of view. So again, that's like a very global approach. That's the first thing I'll do. Pick up any common compensation patterns. They're things that we can work on. And then I'd go into joint specific movement and strength. So for the shoulder, for movement, we're looking at range of motion. So the shoulder, we've got flexion, which is this way. We've got abduction up here. We've got adduction, which is this way. So we don't really look at that. We look at that. Flexion. And then we've also got internal and external rotation. So internal this way, external this way. Okay. So we look at those movements. I don't particularly look at extension, which is going back. So shoulder, flexion, abduction, and then both rotations. That's what I look at, what I think is most important. Some people look at everything, but that's just me. So I'll look at those movements. For shoulder flexion, we're looking for 180 degrees range of motion, so which is pretty much that. For abduction, we're looking for the same, that. And then for internal and external rotation, or medial and lateral rotation, we're looking for 90 degrees on both of those. So what I'm looking for here is how smooth is the movement, are you getting any pain with the movement, and obviously the range of motion, and also comparing the range of motion side to side, injured versus non-injured side. Have we got a massive difference there? Okay, next thing would be strength at the shoulder. So the things that I look at, again, different from what other people focus on, but I would look at your internal and external rotation strength. So that, and I would do this with an isometric hold. So for the external rotation isometric hold, you'd be standing up against a wall, you'd put your arm like this, and you'd simply 90 degrees, and you just hold a weight here, and it'd be a max weight for a 10-second hold with minimal pain. And then the internal rotation, you're lying on your back, and the internal rotation hold is lying on your back, same position, max weight for a 10-second hold. So we've actually got some data. Then we can compare that side to side. That's the first two tests. The other tests I would do a prone row, so a 5-rep max single arm dumbbell row with your chest supported. I'd look at the difference side to side, and I'd also look at a floor press as well. Again, this varies from individual, but those are the main things that I would look at from a strength point of view. Again, what I'm looking for here, any deficit side to side, and does that bring on any pain? Okay. Then I'd go on to some sport-specific testing. So depending on what sport you're doing, I also want to see where you are in the process of rehab. Can you do nothing, or can you do some movements? So for example, if it's in weightlifting and you're getting pain from, let's say, overhead pressing, can you do any other form of overhead pressing without any pain? So the way the testing is designed is you'd start off and you would do the most general type of pressing. So for example, you would do like a single arm dumbbell press. Can we do that with minimal pain? Yes. Okay, good. Ticked off. Can we then do like a Z press, which is where you're sitting on the floor and you're doing like a double arm press through there? Can we do that pain free? So we find something that you can actually do so we can continue to build some pressing strength as opposed to just completely avoiding it. Another example would be gymnastics. If you're getting pain from doing, let's say, like kipping pull-ups or ring muscle-ups, again, the testing for this is built in a way that you'd start off with the most basic variation. So can we actually do a dead hang on the bar with minimal pain? The movement quality is good. And then it would progress all the way up to some kip swings, half bigger kip swings. And then it would go into like a half ring muscle-up, so like nearly all the way up, and then a ring muscle-up. Before the ring, it would be bar. So it'd all be progressing kind of linear fashion, what you can manage. And again, it's kind of looking at where we are and what you want to get back to. So for example, if you want to get back to doing a ring muscle up and you can't do a dead hang on a bar, then we've got quite a way to go. Whereas if you can do like a bar muscle up, it's all good. The journey won't be quite as long. Okay, so that would typically be 3 days of testing via the app. People send over videos. I'd send over video reviews via WhatsApp. That's how it'd work. And then I'd send them into a program. And again, the focus would be split between improving their movement from a full body perspective. So all those movements we looked at initially, the toe touch, the squat, the rotations, the side bends, the hinging, and then that'd be about 40-50%, and then the other 50% would be joint specific. So looking at the shoulder, specifically range of motion and strength initially, okay? And I would typically give people 4 sessions a week of this, and this would be split into 4 different phases of rehab. So typically each of these phases is going to last for between 4 to 6 weeks. This depends on the individual and how they respond, okay? So it'd be split into 4 different phases, and the way to think about this, going from phase 1 through to phase 4, as you progress through the phases, I would make the rehab more specific to the sport you want to get back to, higher volume and higher intensity as we go through rehab, okay? And in between these phases, we would go back and do the exact same testing we did at the start to measure the progress. So in between phase 1 and phase 2, we do, again, a full body assessment, shoulder testing, and the sport-specific testing to see what numbers you've got, and also visually to see are there improvements in movement, again, with those functional movements, so the toe touch, the squat, hinging, etc., etc. So we can actually measure something. Testing in between each of those phases, and then at the end of phase 4, then we're done with rehab and you can return to sport, okay? So we'll jump into the specific phases now, some exercises that I use and how I structure the sessions. So 4 sessions a week. If you're jumping into phase 1, first thing that I would do is 1 to 2 exercises to improve that full body movement or full body mobility. So typically this is a form of a breathing exercise combined with some sort of reach or hip mobility. Again, this varies from individual, but more than likely, again, it's going to be some form of breathing exercise. So this could be lying on your back, or it could be like in a tall kneeling position. And the aim of this breathing exercise is to get the breathing mechanics better, to get your rib cage to move better, essentially, which again translates to what the shoulder blades are doing, which translates to what the shoulder is doing. Okay, and then the reaching or the hip mobility is again looking to improve specific aspects of what you're weak on with the, let's say for example, the toe touch. So let's say for example in the toe touch you couldn't sit back into your hips and you just bend through your back. Then obviously with hip mobility it would be a hip mobility drill to improve that ability to sit deeper into your hips. Okay, so typically those 2 exercises. Then it would go into more joint specific stuff. So it would go into joint specific strength. So the first exercise there would always be an isometric hold. So an isometric hold is an exercise where you're just holding a position, you're not moving. And one of my favorite ones for shoulder rehab is the bottom up kettlebell press. So all that is holding a kettlebell in this position at 90 degrees. So again, we're not retracted, we're not protracted, just a nice neutral position, nice neutral wrist, bottom up kettlebell grip. So the big part of the kettlebell is up here and we're just holding on the handle. And I'd program this for quite long periods of time. So I do give people 3 to 4 sets of 45 to 60 seconds. The reason I make these holds so long is to get the brain to actually fire. And a big part of pain reduction is just getting the brain to think about the tissue that's being worked and think, okay, this is actually okay to load. So that's a big part of isometrics. It's why I include them early on. And obviously also grip in this position, it's going to be working all the shoulder muscles, reducing pain, but also improving strength during this early stage of rehab, which is really, really important, but without aggravating it, because potentially like big aggressive movements initially can aggravate the shoulder. So that's one of the main strength pieces that I use with 99% of people, the bottom up kettlebell hold. And again, you can progress that either by increasing the time period you hold it for or by increasing the weight of the kettlebell. That's number 1. Then typically 2 more strength exercises or supersets. I then put in a superset, so I would combine a pulling movement and then typically a shoulder accessory movement in this stage. So like a pulling movement doesn't typically aggravate the shoulder, so some sort of row, whether that be horizontal, vertical. It wouldn't be anything with hanging with body weight yet, like a pull-up, but it might be like a single arm lat pull down. It could be a seal row, something like that, just to get the back strong. Essentially, very simple. Number 2 then would be some form of smaller shoulder accessory exercise. So this could be a variation of a lateral raise. It could be a rear delt fly, something along those lines. And then what I typically program last is some variation of a core exercise. So this could be a hollow hold. It could be a Copenhagen plank. Again, potentially supersetted with a tricep exercise, usually, which is, again, all ties in because the tricep attaches into the shoulder blade, which affects shoulder function. And for those 2 supersets, so for the first one, which is the pulling or row variation with a shoulder accessory, that would typically be 3 to 4 sets. And the row, you can go anywhere from 8 to 12 reps. And then the shoulder accessory, I would go a bit higher. So I'd go 12 up to 20 reps. And then for the core variation and the tricep accessory, for the core variation, it's just a hold duration. If it's a Copenhagen plank or some sort of plank variation, so 30 up to 60 seconds. And the tricep accessory, I would go a bit higher reps on these. I'd go 12 to 20 reps again on there. So that's typically how a day on phase 1 would look. And again, the main goal with the strength stuff, with that isometric, the bottom up kettlebell hold, is to reduce pain significantly by getting the brain to realize I can load this tissue. Because again, that's the reasoning for why the holds are so long and why that's really, really important. So that would be phase 1. And again, that would typically be done for 4 to 6 weeks. This day would be paired with another day. So you'd have day 1, day 2, and then it would be repeated again later on in the week. Day 2 would be very, very similar to this, just slightly different variation of exercises, but the general structure is very, very similar. That would be phase 1. And then once you've completed 4 to 6 weeks of phase 1, then you would test, retest full body movements, joint-specific range of motion strength, and the sport-specific movements again. Again, have we made improvements with the full body movements in terms of, are we spreading the load out more? With the joint-specific stuff, have we got an improvement in numbers in terms of range of motion and strength? And with the sport-specific stuff, again, have we got an improvement in terms of, can we do slightly more sport-specific movements, or are we still kind of stuck where we are? Okay, then we go into phase 2. The only difference between phase 1 and phase 2 is the addition of some slightly different strength work in phase 2. So phase 1, we just had isometrics. In phase 2, we would add in some more active pressing variations. So typically like a single arm dumbbell press, or an alternating dumbbell press, something along those lines. Again, very, very light, high reps. And this would typically be, part of the second superset with the row variation. So instead of the small shoulder accessory, you would just do the pressing instead. And the other thing that's different would be the introduction of some plyometrics. Now, plyometrics are things like plyo push-ups, throws, etc., etc. And the goals of these are to get the shoulder and the whole body to contract and react quickly to a lot of speed and create the ability to generate a lot of power as well. So the way I like to start plyometrics off with someone would be a single arm wall push-up plyo is really good. So in standing, imagine you're doing a wall push-up in standing, which is fairly easy with both arms, and then you take one arm off, and then you're doing a plyometric variation of this. So again, you're going down into a push-up, you're pushing off the wall, but then you're actually pushing the whole hand off, so you're pushing your whole body off the wall, there's a little bit of gap, and then you're coming back and landing on the wall again. And I would do this for kind of 10 to 15 reps. That's a really nice early stage plyo that I use with a lot of people, because you're actually getting some body weight through this arm, through the shoulder, if this is the bad shoulder, but it's not a lot of load because you're in that standing position. You can kind of control the load because you're the one pushing off the wall. Another nice early stage one is a rapid step up push up. So you can do this in a full push up position, or you can do this in a kneeling push up position if you're not quite strong enough to do that. Get into a push up position, get some plates in front of you, and get them up to about 5 to 6 inches of height just in front of your arms in the press up position. And then all you're going to do in a 10 to 15 second window, you're just going to try step up your hands up to the plate, alternately. So 1, yep. So this hand up, bring that down, and then this hand up, and you're just going to try to do as many reps as you can in 10 to 15 seconds. So again, we're just trying to get everything firing like really, really quickly. So again, press up position, one hand up, one hand down, one hand up, one hand down. So again, you're trying to get all the shoulder muscles, everything to contract really quickly. Okay. Then once you've done phase 2, you go into testing again, repeat that process. Again, have we made improvements in all of those things? And then phase 3, the only difference here would be the reduction again of isometrics, and this would be dependent on the person. So some people I would completely get rid of isometrics, I'd get rid of the bottom up kettlebell hold, and I would just go to some pressing variations that again aren't the movement, isn't the movement that was initially painful. So just making it a bit more general. So again, going back to that overhead press example, if you're getting pain with an overhead press, in this stage you might be doing something like an incline dumbbell press, or some variation of a single arm press, something along those lines, okay? And the plyometrics progress in terms of volume, and they get more difficult. There's more load added in. So for example, we actually get to full plyometric push-ups. We're doing some throws with some med balls, really explosive stuff, slightly lower volume because we're trying to up that intensity a little bit with the plyometrics. And again, repetition of phase 2 and phase 1 with the full body mobility and strength. Full body and joint mobility. So again, working on those functional movements and the range of motion of the shoulder. And then phase 4, again, very, very similar. The only difference there is the introduction of some very sport-specific movements. So in phase 4, we should nearly be doing the movement that was painful that you want to get back to. So again, let's use a different variation, a different example. Let's use a split jerk as the movement that you were struggling to get back to. Well, in phase 4, if you're trying to get back to a split jerk, you might be doing a power jerk or some sort of press / push jerk variation in this phase. Okay, so building up some more sport-specific volume, so teaching the brain about those motor patterns, actually to do those effectively, teaching the brain that that's okay to load that. And then at the end of phase 4, it would again be testing all those things again. So full body mobility, joint specific mobility and range of motion, strength, and then those sport specific movements. So if it was the split jerk at the end of phase 4, you would then test that. That would be pain free at roughly kind of 70 to 80% of your previous 1 rep max. And then you'd be all good, all signed off for rehab. So that's how I break down the different phases. Any questions, let me know. Hopefully there's a few useful exercises in there as well for your kind of introduction into shoulder rehab if you are struggling with shoulder pain. And if you're interested in what we do at FCR, just have a look at the link in the description down below. And I'll see you guys in the next video. I hope that was useful.